The movie takes place in a world that feels like today but slightly different. It's not the future or the past, just an alternate version of the present. In this version of the world, quantum computing is taking over, and owning a quantum computer has become necessary to take part in everyday life. One of the fastest growing jobs is cabling. Cablers are hired to drag thick quantum cables through forests, linking big machines together. These machines are part of the larger quantum system, but the workers don't really know how it all works. They just know that the job pays very well. At the same time, a strange illness called omnia is spreading. It's similar to chronic fatigue syndrome. While some people think it's real, others think it's fake, and like many unclear illnesses, it attracts scams and false cures. In a dark room, a video talks about the 7 basics of cabling. The woman in the video explains how trades can now move at hyperspeed thanks to a bundle of fiber optic cables transmitting signals across countries in mere milliseconds. With the dramatic advances in recent years, the next era of financial growth is upon us, and with it, the next era of human potential. This is when the unlimited possibilities of quantum come in. The scene shifts to show Ray, a delivery man aiding his sick brother James. James is suffering from omnia, whose treatment is expensive, or at least what the scammers say. Although Ray has a delivery job, he cannot afford to take his younger brother to a doctor. He desperately needs money for care and is willing to do anything to help his brother. Later on, Ray gets a parking ticket for leaving his van on the wrong side of the street. Frustrated, he argues with the officer, saying he didn't know it was a holiday. The officer asks if he checked his calendar, and Ray tells her he did, but there was no holiday listed. She then asks if he's using the standard quantum calendar and if he owns a quantum computer. When Ray says no, she explains, that's the problem. The city now runs everything on the quantum system, including the calendar. Without a quantum computer, his information is outdated. Frustrated and desperate for cash, Ray visits Felix, his old friend who runs a shady business. He cuts a deal with him to get an old cabling medallion, an ID that lets you work as a cabler. In return, he has to give 30% of his earnings to Felix. It's unfair, but it's his only way into the job. And just like that, Ray, a man who's not fit, hates hiking, and doesn't understand tech, decides to go out in the woods, pulling cable for reasons he doesn't understand. He doesn't care what it's for, he just wants to help his brother. After leaving his brother for treatment at a hospital, Ray meets up with other cablers and drives up to Quantum Hub. This is where they are set up with a company, screened, and shown a video tutorial that explains their job responsibilities. Generally, each user works with a basic setup, a cabling cart equipped with a cabling monitor and a handheld GPS unit. Users then need to open the app on their smartphone to sync with their GPS device. But there's a catch. Once inside a zone, the cablers will meet a fleet of automated cabling carts that pick up slacks when routes can't be completed by humans. After finishing his tests, Ray rejoins the group and they drive into a quiet neighborhood. One of them, Joe, hops out and casually opens the garage of a nearby house. Ray, confused, turns to another woman named Jessica and asks if Joe knows the people who live there. Jessica shakes her head and explains that they don't. The group stores their cabling gear in garages like this so they don't have to haul everything back to the city. Thanks to Quantum, they can connect to any home security system and unlock doors as needed, mainly just to store their stuff. Homeowners usually rent out the space through a bidding system and agree on a price. In the next scene, the group arrives at Cabler's Allegheny State Park, where they gear themselves up and get ready to start their adventure. But Ray is a technophobe who can barely hike, struggles to use the cabling app, and doesn't understand the vague rules of the cabling community. Thankfully, another guy helps him to sync his phone with the GPS device. After setting up, each cabler scans their medallion to register their entry. When Ray steps up, the scanner identifies him as Lapsus Beef Tech, a name that immediately draws attention and turns heads his way. Normally, cablers choose their own username and avatar when they register a medallion, but since Ray bought his on the black market, he didn't get that option. As a result, he's stuck with the original nickname Lapsus Beef Tech, and every time someone sees that name, people give him strange looks like they're either offended or uncomfortable. Turns out the medallion once belonged to a cabler who was a coder involved in helping the cabling bots machines created by the company to replace human workers. These bots compete directly with cablers. If a bot reaches the destination first, the human cabler doesn't get paid. So being connected to Lapsus Beef Tech, a name tied to helping the bots, makes Ray a target, even though he has no idea what he's gotten himself into. In the next scene, Jessica helps Ray start his route on the medallion. She explains to him that the more experience you have as a cabler, the harder the terrain and longer the route will be. Moreover, they won't be together on the same route because Ray is just a beginner. After a briefing, Ray plugs his cable into a large cube of quantum and begins his adventure as a cabler. Shortly after walking for a while, Ray decides to lie down. However, his medallion notifies him to rest tonight, encouraging him to continue his race and challenge the status quo. When he continues his work for some time, his cable suddenly runs out. His medallion then pops up a message informing him that when cablers run out of cables, one of the aerial resupply units will find them and drop fresh bundles for them. However, Ray is completely technologically challenged as he can barely use a basic app. Seeing his situation, a fellow cabler then guides him to press the drop button on the action menu. With his help, Ray gets a fresh bundle of cable and continues his adventure. Later, while taking a deserving rest under a tree, Ray notices a blonde woman sleeping next to him. Just when he is about to talk to her, an alarm goes off in his medallion, notifying him to continue his journey. At the end of the day, Ray comes across a scanner where cablers check in their medallions to register the completion of their route. A woman steps in to help him, but when the name Lapsus Beef Tech pops up on the screen, she gives him a strange look. That day, Ray earns $795 for his work and heads to a nearby campsite to rest. He stops by a small store to buy some lasagna, and the owner asks him to scan his medallion first. When he does, it shows that he has over 60,000 points, something only a highly experienced cabler would have. The other customers glance at him, clearly suspicious. Feeling uncomfortable, Ray quickly decides to pay in cash and keep a low profile while he figures out whose medallion he's actually using. Back at camp, his curiosity gets the better of him. He browses through the medallion and finds a folder labeled Lapsus Beef Tech's files. Inside, he plays a video showing a man presenting a cart-like robot to his young daughter and asking her what they should name it. She replies, "That's Lapsus." At the same time, a bot creeps towards him, but for some reason, it suddenly stops moving. After watching the video, Ray calls Felix, who seems evasive and distracted. Felix says he's tied up in something and can't talk much, but Ray presses him, asking where the medallion really came from. He mentions how people keep reacting strangely whenever he says his trail name, and how odd it is that he already has so many points on his first day. Felix brushes it off, saying Ray must have had a lucky day and earned the points himself. Before Ray can ask anything more, the call suddenly drops. That night, Ray talks with other cablers and learns that one of them has been lapped by an automated cart, so his friends are helping him get some materials to set a wire trap to stop the bot and reclaim his route. Just then, a woman asks Ray his trail name so that she can add him to their network. If they are in the same zone, they can communicate with each other and end up at the same campsite. Ray hesitatingly says his username, and the reactions from others are not surprising. The woman then deliberately pitches her donation project and asks him if he can donate some points to her charity. Ray says he'll think about it and agrees to meet them for breakfast tomorrow. However, the next morning, he wakes up to find the campsite empty. The others have already packed up and headed out for work while leaving him behind. That afternoon, Ray receives a call from the hospital where his brother is being treated. The doctor explains that they'd like to begin a new procedure called magnesium acoustics and need Ray's permission to move forward, but it comes with a steep price, $19,000 a week. Ray asks to speak with his brother, but the doctor says he's asleep. Feeling suspicious, he decides not to approve the new treatment and chooses to stick with the normal plan for now. Just then, Ray spots a cabler he'd seen the other night, the one who had been outrun by a bot. The man is setting up a wire trap, hoping to disable the bot, but the plan quickly falls apart when the bot detects his DNA and avoids the trap easily. Moments later, the cabler is arrested by the authorities. In the next scene, Ray completes his second route and receives his lucrative earnings. While a tech marketer tries to sell him a device, Ray goes through a list of routes for his next journey. Although hesitant at first, he promptly chooses his next route, which promises him more than $100,000. The next day, Ray begins his third day as a cabler. Before heading out, he leaves a voicemail for his brother, letting him know that he's gone ahead and upgraded the treatment plan. He tells him to call back once he's feeling better. As the story unfolds, we discover there's an underground movement pushing back against the powerful cabling company that controls all the work. These rebels, led by Joe, are trying to find backdoors and tricks to shut down the bots that keep stealing their routes and pay. But without inside information, their tactics have been pretty basic so far. They've tried setting traps, tripwires, and other low-tech tricks. Unfortunately, the bots have already figured out how to avoid them. What the cablers really need is something stronger and more permanent. That night, Ray joins a group of cablers around a campfire. As they chat, he casually mentions his username. This is when the mood shifts instantly. An older man stands up and angrily confronts him, though Ray has no idea what he did wrong. After everything settles, another cabler pulls Ray aside, apologizes on behalf of his friend, and quietly advises him not to share his username with strangers for his own safety. However, he doesn't explain who Lapsus Beeftech really was and leaves without giving any more details. The next day, while out on the trail, Ray's cable runs out again. Due to a weak signal, the aerial supply unit, a drone-like bot, drops a new bundle a short distance away. Before Ray can reach it, a kid appears out of nowhere and snatches it. Ray chases him, but ends up falling into a trap. Suddenly, several other kids surround him and demand his money and supplies. Just as things are about to escalate, a blonde woman arrives and threatens to report the kids to the authorities. Feeling scared, they scatter into the woods. The woman introduces herself as Anna and explains that the kids are mostly harmless as long as you scare them off with the threat of reporting. After dusting himself off, Ray introduces himself, and the two continue their route together. As they walk, Anna shares that she cables for 6 months out of the year, this being her 5th year, and spends the other 6 months doing what she enjoys, like writing. Turns out, Anna secretly writes articles exposing the cabling company and highlighting how it operates as a monopoly and takes advantage of cablers like herself. That night, a bot crawls into Ray's tent, taps into the cable he connected to the last junction, and moves past him. This means Ray loses his lead on the route, and unless he knocks the bot off course, he won't get paid. He doesn't realize this until the next morning, and quickly turns to Anna for help. Anna decides to use one of her go-to tactics, what she calls her Stonehenge strategy. Together, they gather rocks and build a small stone circle. Then, they install another stone above it, tied with a cord. As the bot approaches and enters the stone circle, the tied stone is released and traps the bot inside. Inside the circle, the bot can move around freely, which keeps it from performing an automatic DNA scan. It will likely stay there for a day or two, trying to figure out how to escape from what it assumes is a problem it caused itself. In the meantime, Ray can get back on track and secure his payment. The next day, Ray regains his route and thanks Anna for her help. As they talk, he eventually discovers the truth about Lapsus Beeftech, the original owner of his medallion. He was a tech insider who helped the cabling company design bots that are faster and smarter than humans. He even used DNA sensing technology to outsmart cablers' traps and trigger aggressive bot responses. For this, he had collected cheek swabs from cablers that he said were for a bone marrow transplant registry. And then, he used these cheek swabs to build out the first version of the DNA database that bots still use today to catch cablers tampering with them. No wonder the name Lapsus Beef Tech was so hated in the cabling world. It also explains a few other things like why Ray's account already had thousands of credit points in it, and why he was being assigned high-paying, long-distance routes that no one else could access. After just one weekend of cabling, he had suddenly been offered a route worth more than $100,000. It's a rare long-haul job, the kind usually reserved for top-level cablers. Through Anna, Ray also learns about the underground movement trying to resist the bots and take back control of their work. The next morning, as they resume their long-haul journey, Ray is suddenly upgraded to a route typically reserved for experienced cablers. Just before they part ways, Anna reveals that she knows his trail name and that he's been using the medallion that once belonged to Lapsus Beef Tech, even though he lied about it earlier. She tells him she doesn't know who he really is, why he's out here, or who he might be working for, but urges him to find the code or key to stop the bots. She recalls Ray once mentioning how a bot had mysteriously stopped in front of him on one of his early routes and believes it could be a clue. Before leaving, she tells him to look for Half Moon Naturals where he might get the answer. The next day, Ray eventually finishes his route, but not without trouble. To stop a bot from reaching the destination first, he's forced to destroy it. As a result, the payment for the route is frozen until an investigation is done. This is a huge problem, especially since his brother needs thousands of dollars for his Omnia treatments by the weekend. On top of that, Felix, the man who gave Ray the medallion, still expects his 30% cut. Following a lead from Anna, Ray travels to a company called Half Moon Naturals to learn more about the original Lapsus Beef Tech. He also sneaks his brother out of the hospital to avoid the bills, and together they locate the store. There, they finally meet the real man behind the name, now working quietly at the Naturals company. It's there that Ray believes he uncovered a major secret. The bots are triggered and controlled by some key codes. Back at home, James goes through Lapsus's old account and tries to find the link between his posts and the key to stopping the bots. Just then, Felix shows up at the door and threatens to harm Ray and James if they don't pay his cut. Desperate for money, both Ray and James start working as cablers in the forest, where they bump into Anna. As they reunite, Ray mentions the video file he had found in Lapsus's account, which contained a clip of a young girl speaking. The trio finally realizes that the video might be the key to solving their bot problem. Anna then comes clean, and after seeing the video, she reveals that the small girl speaking in the video is actually her, meaning that she is Lapsus' daughter, and that video holds the key to shutting down the bots. Armed with this discovery, the trio reports to the cabling community led by Joe. They join forces, and together, they track down the bots one by one. Then, they play the video file and successfully shut them all down. As a result, the cabling monopoly panics. In a desperate move, the CEO confronts Lapsus and demands he help them with his coding skills again. However, this time, Lapsus willfully refuses to do so. When asked if he knows who Anna is, he lies and says he doesn't. After the cablers discover that Anna's voice can be used to shut down the bots, they finally gain the upper hand. One by one, they disable the machines, and soon nearly all the bots are offline. The cablers celebrate their victory and finally reclaim control over their work. But just as the celebrations begin, one last bot quietly slips out of the forest. It walks up a nearby road unnoticed and makes its way to a storage garage. There, it opens the door and steps inside, where a human is waiting. Without a word, the person plugs the bot in.